Watch right now on the Front News Project. War in the Black Sea, elimination of Russian aviation, the Ukrainian Navy destroys Russian helicopters. Ukraine will close the skies over the Middle East. The armed forces of Ukraine know exactly how to fight Iranian Shaheds. And also, the battle for Donbass. Real combat footage. You have to see this. Fiery, intense and blazing. Watch frontline footage right now. Greetings, this is Volodymyr Timoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic. The armed forces of Ukraine are successfully liberating their territories. At least 9 settlements have been deoccupied in the south. In Donbass and Crimea, Ukrainian defenders are actively preparing the ground for their liberation. First and foremost, enemy ammunition depots and logistics are being successfully destroyed. The occupiers no longer feel safe even in Donetsk and Mariupol, where over the past, after a relatively calm year, they had already started to relax. Details in our report. The armed forces of Ukraine cannot be stopped anymore. Our defenders have launched a counteroffensive. In an instant, the Russian front collapsed and the occupiers began to flee, abandoning more and more of the territories they had previously seized.
Overall, in the 2 months of this year, as we can see, up to 400 square kilometers of territory have been liberated.
Recently, the focus of Ukrainian attacks has shifted to the Russians' near-rear positions in the occupied territories. The past week has been one of the most significant and successful in terms of the frequency and geographic spread of strikes against the enemy.
The military forces of the Russian Federation's casualty rates and equipment losses per month are currently demonstrating a consistent downward trend. December, January, February, all of this is confirmed.
There you have it. For example, our aviation and HIMARS MLRS are striking enemy positions, infantry and the occupiers' equipment in the Alexandrovsk direction. After such a massive strike, the Russian invaders have absolutely no chance of survival. And here is the Zaporizhia direction. Here, a Kasta radar station was destroyed by Ukrainian forces. Unmanned systems. The geography of strikes during the Ukrainian armed forces counteroffensive is impressive. Our defenders managed to strike not only along the front line, but also behind enemy lines. Recently, Mariupol and Yalta have also been hit. Explosions there do not cease. The Ukrainian armed forces are striking at barracks, ammunition depots, deployment sites, and air defense assets.
We know that a little over a month ago, the Commander-in-Chief, General Syrskyi, said that defense alone would not solve the issues. In this war, and at the very least, it must be active. This means that counterattacks are being carried out in certain areas.
It's turning out to be a hot week for the occupiers in Tokmak and the surrounding areas. For the first time, the occupied city is under such intense fire. It was here before the strikes began that the largest concentration of Russian rear reserves was gathered for offensives, maneuvering, and attacks along the front line.
The armed forces of Ukraine have amassed a substantial concentration of military forces, primarily consisting of airborne assault troops, which are considered the most highly specialized and elite combat units of the Ukrainian armed forces. And they have done so with the specific aim of launching operations from the northern direction. By steadily advancing from the north toward the south, the objective is to successfully reach the strategic rear of the Russian group, which is currently operating to the west of Huliaipol.
Putin's army finds no peace in Crimea either. There, the Ukrainian defense forces struck hangars in Yevpatoria where Russian troops stored and serviced multi-purpose drones. Forepost and Orion. By the way, the Ukrainian armed forces owe such outstanding effectiveness of their strikes, among other things, to Ukrainian partisans who secretly operate in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, as well as in Russia.
Pro-Ukrainian residents who were the first to carve out space in the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea put up all sorts of Ukrainian flags, Ukrainian symbols, and hung yellow ribbons. Later, this resistance grew stronger. They began to pass on, as confirmed by the resistance movement, military coordinates and military data.
Their intelligence is invaluable, and each new act of sabotage becomes almost a personal slap in the face for the Kremlin and Putin.
In Klin-Moscow region, an Atesh agent destroyed a Liven mobile satellite communication complex. And
Our partisans regularly carry out similar attacks.
Members of the movement say that it was precisely their actions and the information they gathered that made this possible. Ukrainian strikes on Crimea. In particular, according to Atesh, it was they who directed the Ukrainian missile strike on the Russian landing ship and submarine, the Minsk and the Rostov-on-Don, as well as the attack on the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Fleet in September 2023. And
Now, Ukrainian partisans from the resistance are paralyzing a key railway line in Luhansk, which has dealt a serious blow to the supply of the Pokrovsk grouping of the Russian armed forces. At present, the partisans are actively helping our defenders with the spring counteroffensive.
They have united and are carrying out active actions as part of the partisan movement.
Specifically in the military sphere, they conduct sabotage operations at military facilities, as well as carry out terrorist acts, eliminating occupation officials both in newly occupied territories and in the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea. They are also actively engaged in gathering and transmitting military information.
This data lets Ukrainian forces deliver precise strikes against enemy groups.
They say that they provide information about air defense systems, warehouses, military bases, and troop movements, sometimes observing targets for weeks.
In addition, our partisans in Donbass and Crimea are actively preparing the ground for the liberation of the region seized by Putin. Thanks to their work, the occupiers never feel safe, neither in Donetsk nor in Mariupol, nor anywhere on the territory of the Crimean Peninsula. And with the inevitable advance of the armed forces of Ukraine at the front, the fear among Russians only grows.
Brothers and sisters, the military movement Atesh is preparing for the liberation of Crimea from the Rashists. We are near Jankoy, waiting for the armed forces of Ukraine. We have created dozens of caches with weapons, explosives, and ammunition. As soon as the armed forces of Ukraine cross the administrative border with Crimea, we will seize administrative buildings and military facilities.
Now, an analysis of the operational situation on the blazing Pokrovsk direction of the front. Fierce battles continue. On the Pokrovsk direction, the enemy carried out 20 attacks.